everyone. Welcome to our next panel on banking transformed, moving to the cloud. I'm Julie Chariell. I'm senior analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, covering fintech. And I'm very pleased to be joined here by a great group of panelists. We're going to be talking about moving to the cloud today, which I imagine is something that everyone on the IT side is grappling with on a regular basis. According to Accenture, about 46% of banks already are spending between 11 and 20% of their budgets on cloud services. And in about 3 years, that should get to 63%. So the race is on. Let me welcome our panelists. First, we have Andrew AJ Lang. He's Chief Technology Officer at JP Morgan Chase. We have Judith Pinto, Managing Director of Promontory Financial Group, which is an IBM company, and Shadman Zafar, Head of Consumer Banking Technology at Citi. Let's launch right into it, everybody. I want to first ask you, what was your firm's primary rationale or inspiration for migrating to the cloud? And what was the problem you were trying to solve? And I think sort of the conventional wisdom out there is that the larger banks are all sort of chasing the newer fintechs and moving to the cloud sort of because they had to, and because they had to compete, be faster, more agile. But tell us about what you've seen. AJ, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So we started our journey several years ago to modernize our operating environments, and cloud has become a critical component of that modernization journey. And one of the reasons, for that is we see the opportunity for higher levels of efficiency, taking advantage of dynamic scale, and of course also the advantage of new capabilities more rapidly because they're integrated. They come integrated within the cloud management platforms. So the scalable architecture, we use repeatable blueprints. We integrate our security controls into the blueprint so that when you instantiate an environment, you get all of the controls and capabilities built into that. And also the other areas was geographic reach that we can get, and the resiliency patterns that we can deploy across that geography. Another big area for us was around the big data analytic environments and taking advantage of machine learning, AI. We've created a scalable AI platform that builds out all the AI capabilities that we need, allows us to present those back to our data scientists, along with the elastic compute that allows us to really accelerate our efforts to infuse analytics into everything that we do within the firm.
Shadman, do you want to tell us about your experience, your decision, your inspiration at Citi to move to the cloud?
Sure, Julie. I think I would say, first of all, it's very similar to what AJ described. But I would say that it's probably not one thing, which is it's not really a decision around maybe chasing specific fintechs as much. As a large bank, we have a fairly measured approach towards cloud or any sort of new fundamental new technology. It has really driven out of a lot of focus on flexible scaling, resiliency, a standard approach to the overall technology stack, and maybe cutting through some of the, if you say, buzzwords. The few big things that really matter is getting to a continuous integration and deployment model in a very standardized way, and simplification of technology stack. So naturally getting to a large integrated platform, like a public cloud, you start to sort of force yourself in a certain way to have a simplified, integrated technology stack, which then naturally brings lots of other benefits as well. In simplification of your application writing, simplification of how you manage your security, and that just takes you to the next level, both from efficiency perspective, but just overall management of technology, asset, and plant.
And Judith, you have an interesting perspective seeing really across a variety of your banking clients. Can you share with us what's gotten them excited in moving to the cloud?
Yeah, just to not repeat what's already been said, because I think those are themes we see at most financial institutions. But I think a big driver is the large amount of data that organizations accumulate now. It's hard to do that sort of on premises. It's very expensive from a technology perspective. So being able to take advantage of cloud technologies to help manage that data, do data analytics. It's, it's hard to replicate that, in an internal environment.
So let me go back to AJ. Any kind of big transition like this, transformation really is never easy. It always is met with some sort of unforeseen complications and challenges. So can you share with us what were some of the biggest challenges that you saw at JP Morgan and just as you've been on this journey?
Yeah, I would just build off of what was just said. The biggest challenge we've had is the data gravity challenge. So the large amounts of data that we've built up over a number of years on-prem, and being able to move that data to the public cloud for leverage within our Omni AI or AI/ML environment has been our biggest challenge and continues to be something that we're focused on as we move into 21.
Judith, what are you seeing some of your clients grapple with through this?
Well, I think that one of the largest challenges they have is how to take advantage of these new technologies in a safe, sort of compliant way, and being able to demonstrate to their regulators that they're able to apply the same security controls, the same data protection controls in a cloud environment that they do in an on-premise environment. And so working with those cloud providers to gain transparency into how those controls work, that's one of the largest challenges, and that's why a number of financial institutions have built out private clouds, because it's easier to do that. But banks are very interested in how can they leverage public cloud infrastructures, because it's much more cost effective. And so really kind of working through that with their regulators, and being able to provide evidence that they're still compliant with the regulatory requirements.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that if we can. I know that many companies tend to start on the private cloud and then migrate to the public cloud. And it is typically those regulators who are influencing some of those considerations in that decision to move to the public cloud. Can you describe how some of your clients may be navigating that? Are they holding certain things on the private cloud? What are they comfortable moving to the public cloud? Just a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I think most institutions are taking a very measured approach and looking at the criticality of the application of the data and making the determination what's the best environment for that. And so, they're very cautious. I've heard a number of CTOs and chief information security officers use this phrase, we're dipping our toes in the water, because they want to progress at a pace that ensures that they are still compliant. And so looking at workloads, evaluating them for their criticality and data sensitivity, and determining, what's the appropriate, environment.
Shadman, is this something that you've started to consider at Citi, and have you made any decisions on private versus public cloud?
Yes, most definitely. We actually took exactly that strategy for that and some additional reasons. So actually, for last few years, we actually made the decision to move to a private cloud. And I would say, one of the challenges also moving to cloud is, and that sort of drives this strategy to some extent, is that as opposed to many other technology shifts, generally the technology shift is very localized to a specific set of people within a technology organization. Let's say maybe a large, big change in last few decades have been, let's say, moving from like COBOL to Java. Specific application developers would sort of focus on it, and the rest of the operation sort of works as you move to cloud. Developers learn new things, technology operations learn new things, InfoSec learn new things. It affects many different parts of the organization. So we actually decided to go to a private cloud, get into a heavy upskilling from a talent's perspective within the organization, and really sort of learn our way, make different parts of the organization know how sort of cloud work, and then take that learning and a sort of a newly upskilled, if you will, upgraded set of operations, application development skills, and others to move to the next stage. So we have most definitely taken that approach, both from proving to ourselves and ensuring that we are approaching the technology shift in the right way, and training the organization so we are ready for the next big steps, if you will. And in many ways, by the way, we also seen sort of all the benefits we are expecting, much of that also being realized in a private cloud as well. Now, as we get to the next stage, we hope to see that those benefits expand further.
Interesting. And taking a step back a bit from the public cloud, private cloud decision, how about the decision just what to move to the cloud in general? As you made the decision working with the business side of your organization, what do you keep in-house? What do you migrate? AJ, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. We've gone down a multi-cloud strategy, so we have both private cloud and our public cloud as well, and we're standing up multiple public cloud environments and progressing all of those, simultaneously. On the decisions of what to keep on-prem versus in the sort of traditional data centers versus in the cloud environments, I mean, certainly our mainframe applications and some of the legacy applications, which are more monolithic in nature, those really at this point are required to stay within the sort of standard data center environments until they get re-architected and re-engineered and then into more of a service-based model that can then migrate more directly into, and on a different tech stack, more directly into a cloud-based environment. So for our public cloud and private cloud environments, we've really targeted our Java.NET workloads, those workloads that are in more of a service structure, microservice-based or container-based structure. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, our AI/ML environment, we really think the public cloud is the right place for that because of the need to be able to independently scale compute and storage, as well as all the capabilities that we get in the public cloud as far as adoption of the AI/ML advancements that are coming forward there. So that's our direction forward.
Shadman, I saw you nodding a bit. I imagine you made some of the similar kinds of decisions. Anything else to add?
No, I was actually more than nodding. I was smiling because it's interesting how people reach to the similar decisions. Absolutely, our focus have been really around areas where sort of a lot of change is happening. Number one, where sort of application structures are changing. So traditionally, applications used to be one big thing. As the architectures are evolving, they are getting distributed down into a bunch of microservices. And that's primarily happening in a lot of front-end applications like digital and some of the data which sort of feeds through AI and ML capabilities. So those are the things we have sort of targeted first to move into cloud because they benefit the most. The fast change, ability to do the fast change quickly in a cloud environment, ability to have flexible upscale, downscale, variability in usage, they benefit the most. And time will tell, but at least our thought is some of the back-end core product processors, at least right now, is not something that we see as like benefiting hugely immediately from a cloud move. So very similar to what AJ said has been our thought process as well of what goes first into cloud and why.
Right. And Judith, maybe you could help us a little bit understand how sort of you're advising clients on this as they're trying to make these decisions about what to move, what to keep in-house. How are you helping guide them through that?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of something Shadman had said earlier about how other parts of the organization have to come up to speed. And I think security and compliance is one of those areas where it's just you operate those things differently in a cloud environment. You have the same level of control, but the implementation is different. And so we spend time talking with organizations and guiding them how to make those changes, looking at it in an innovative way, but being able to still demonstrate that you remain compliant and secure. It's just done differently. And I thought that was a really important point about the pace at which an organization makes that migration is you do have to allow the other parts of the organization to come up to speed and change the way they operate as well.
Yeah, and the pace is an interesting one, and I know I'm curious about sort of for each of you, or really for the JP Morgan and Citi standpoint, where are you in that process to your planned cloud migration, and how long ultimately does it take?
You want to go, AJ, first?
Sorry, AJ, do you want to start with that one?
Okay, sorry. Wasn't sure which one of us you were directing that one to. So we've been on our journey for several years, and we've made significant progress on both public and private cloud implementation. Our approach has been to build security in at the start. So we take a blueprint approach. So it's a very prescriptive structure. We go through our cloud design council, our security review council, et cetera. And then those blueprints are hardened with the security controls built in and all the monitoring and so forth. And so when we instantiate an environment, it's from the blueprints. So there is no configuration drift. We manage for that, et cetera. So there's no way to work around the controls or make a mistake with that control environment. So from that perspective, we think we're in very good shape, and taking advantage of what you can do with cloud technology, which is easier to do with embedding those controls and using that blueprinted process than you can with sort of the traditional data center environments. Now, in our data center environment, we're taking maybe those same approaches and using blueprinting controls now back in our data center environments as well, so that everything becomes a very standardized, structured process and remove the variability out of the environments. And with that, then it's also makes it faster for us to deploy and to operate in the cloud environments. So as was mentioned earlier, we've spent a lot of time on our CI/CD, our SDLC process, and to ensure that everything is out of code, so it's infrastructure as code and deployment as code, et cetera, so that we manage that and then make that available for our software engineers. Streamline the process for them, take many of the things that they would have to worry about in more your traditional environments and eliminate those because we've built them into the structures that they're deploying and abstract that away from them. So that's where we are on the journey. It's we're picking up the pace every quarter, accelerating through, and got a lot of work ahead of us in 21 and 22, I'd say. So.
Yeah, I imagine. Shadman, do you want to talk about where Citi is, where you are in that migration? What inning are you in? How is it unfolding?
Yes, of course. So as I mentioned earlier, I think so. We have been on a private cloud environment for a few years now. And Julie, if you think about sort of 5 typical stages of moving to a cloud or to a new technology, being sort of educating, upskilling the talent, number one, so doing your first app, sort of your trial application in a new environment, and then having sort of a first environment running, which we call as private cloud, then getting into public cloud and essentially getting into a continuous improvement mode. We are at the end of our sort of a stage 3 and starting to plan the stage 4 of sort of big applications in public cloud. We are actively, as I just said, we are sort of thinking through very careful design around security, sort of especially as some of the data moves into public cloud. And at the same time, looking at some of the organizational adjustments around automation on continuous integration and continuous delivery, which really delivers a lot of the great value of moving into the cloud. We really think about, as we really scale and go into continuous improvement, ideally would like to get to a blue-green deployment model where you could, in a very sort of reliable way, continue to deploy on a very regular basis to large number of customers through a model that is pioneered in large tech platforms and bringing that to our customers as well as our next stage of focus.
Right. So in hearing each of you talk, it seems clear that part of this process, an important part of it, is also working with the business side of your organizations to help make these decisions, to help make sure these things are implemented, most efficiently and properly. So Judith, maybe you can talk about initially, how you're advising clients to sort of align best with the business side, and how do you ensure that happens in a smooth and ongoing way?
Right. You need to have strong governance processes in place to ensure that the business is aligned and the technology aligns with the business strategy. And also with sort of from a risk management perspective as well, we advise clients on how to ensure that there's governance over this process of let's say the business decides they want to, do this now. How does technology align with that? Who's involved in making those decisions? And making sure that those decisions are documented and reviewed in their regular risk management processes. Making sure that those risk management processes are embedded in the new technologies as well. And both have spoken about how that gets embedded from the beginning. And I think that's key. We've seen a lot of organizations kind of fail to do that and then try to add it on at the end, which is obviously much more challenging. So to make sure all of these things are embedded at the
Right. AJ, do you want to talk about how you've managed to work with the business side at JP Morgan Chase through all of this, and maybe sort of what works, what doesn't work?
Yeah, we've established what we call our macro metrics, which includes things like speed and stability, scalability, et cetera, and security, obviously. And across those, we then work with the business teams to identify what are the workloads that we want to migrate from a priority standpoint into the cloud. The other thing we've done which has really helped us is, which was referenced earlier around, getting the teams trained to operate in the cloud, as we run what we call cloud parties or these campaigns, where we bring everybody together. It's kind of a garage type model. And of course, with COVID, it's all been virtual now. We've transitioned over to that. But in these parties or these campaigns, we bring all the different disciplines together. So in many cases, it includes some of the business sponsorship, as well as our the software engineers, along with our security engineers and our cloud engineers, and work through a short sprint of a week to take a set of workloads that we've identified and push those all the way through dev, test, and then prod, and have them up and running for parallel testing, and then cut over into the cloud. It's been a great way to bring a large part of the organization up on what it means to operate in the cloud, and also creates a camaraderie across the teams as well. So it's an educational session, as well as we get a lot of work done through that effort.
Interesting. Sounds fun too. Shadman, do you want to talk about some things that you've done at Citi to help integrate the business and IT sides through this project?
Yes, of course. So in Citi, the approach we have taken is really what we call sort of an outcome-based planning. So as opposed to essentially thinking about planning with business to sort of say, we want to move to cloud, and because a new technology, we are essentially focused on key business outcomes as opposed to technology for technology's sake. But that has actually led us in a very strong direction correctly into taking specific steps towards a migration to cloud. So those outcomes are things like ability to scale up and down in a very reliable way. That's actually an underlying capability that cloud provides, but we were essentially committing that as an outcome, and then we utilized the cloud as a technology to deliver that. Similarly goes our ability or agility to deploy new capabilities and changes into the marketplace. The level of automation in the pipeline of how we do software development for our system. So each one of those we sort of focus on metrics around outcome, and then the result of that, and we achieve those outcomes through sort of the right migration to the right pieces of technology, in some cases being cloud.
Sounds quite integrated. It's great. So I'm curious, you're along this journey, right? It's obviously still in the relatively early stages, and more to come, and more to be expected. But initially, so far, what are some of the benefits that you've realized already? AJ, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, the macro metrics, which are our outcome metrics, so we're very, very similar here on how we're approaching this. We've seen significant improvement across all of our macro metrics. The security controls, since we built that in at the start, and it's instantiated in everything that we do, we see very good resiliency from that, from those measures. Our resiliency numbers, availability, stability, and then our speed metrics, which is how fast can we deploy new capabilities and features. And so we track all of those. We see improvements on there. Of course, on the savings side as well, significant savings that we see from leveraging cloud, both private and public cloud, with it sort of steps up, if you will, from each of the different environments for lower cost of operations as well. So it's that's been a very positive results across all of our macro metrics, our outcome metrics.
Shadman, can you share with us some of the early benefits you've seen?
Yes, of course. So first and foremost, I would say the somewhat intangible but very powerful benefit has really been energizing the talent to both learn new technology. People sort of joining in as we are sort of utilizing new technology has been an energizing force in the organization. But sort of moving beyond that, I think there are a few times, frankly, in people's careers, you get an opportunity to actually refactor from ground up, from metal up to the application, and rethink the applications in a way that you can have correct by design and secure by design principles incorporated into your applications. Those essentially means that the set of controls and set of security that you typically overlay on top of your applications, as you are refactoring that to sort of from a perspective of moving to cloud, you can truly have them designed at the foundation layer, as opposed to I wouldn't say patches on the top, but sort of being layered on top, which have been fantastic. Any piece that we have moved in that direction have been fantastic from my perspective of integrating correct by design and secure by design principles into our core apps that are moving to cloud.
Interesting. And Judith, what are you advising clients if you're talking to clients who are thinking about going down this path to migrating to the cloud, and they want to know what some of the early deliverables, the early kind of good news they can share with management? What are you telling them that can be?
I just echo what was saying about being sort of secure and compliant by design, is really taking that opportunity to look at this anew. And I agree with the comments. People get very excited about this, about being able to innovate, being able to, instead of doing this after the fact, really taking a hard look and refactoring, reanalyzing, and we like to also use the phrase compliant by design, building these controls in so that they don't have to be configured by somebody at some time. They're already kind of built in. The guardrails are there, and I think that's really key. And so we talk to our clients about doing the same thing, is taking a step back first, deciding what your end goal is, and then designing it that way. Not going in and deciding after the fact what needs to be turned on or off, or from the very beginning.
And I want to kind of take the other end of the spectrum. Right? We talked about some of the technical benefits early on. What's the final promised land, right? So if you're talking to the board of directors and looking for an approval for this project, or even people like me or the investment community who look at the big picture, right? What's that sort of ultimate promised land of what you get after this entire migration is done? AJ, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'll just go back to what was said early on, is that it's really more about the workloads themselves. If you can break your workloads down into microservices, and you can then you can start to operate, scale independently. You can deploy independently. You can have resiliency across geographies, et cetera. I think that's the first major critical step of really translating your portfolio, your applications into that service-based structure. And then with that, you get the benefit or the full value of what you can get through the cloud, which is the ability to do that deployment in rapid fashion, because everything is fully standardized across those cloud management platforms. And then the other big area, again, is the AI/ML environment, the ability to operate AI/ML at scale, to independently scale your compute and your storage, to get the value and leverage of all that data that you need to have in the available for to doing ML training and then serving back into production. So.
Right. Shadman, how did you sell this to the top? This project.
So I think of actually a cloud movement to a multiple big transformations that have taken place in tech industry. It's really a story about a industrialized abstraction layer being created. Many years ago, we all remember when high-level languages were produced, a lot of inefficiency came out of the system. People were able to focus a lot more on business logic and capability without worrying about underlying low-level capabilities of how something can crash and whatnot. And that created almost a huge eruption of sort of IT being able to provide new services into the business world. I think similarly, as infrastructure starts to get abstracted in a certain way, the technology organizations can focus a lot more at a higher level of capabilities without worrying about, in some cases, some of the underlying details. Also, it's a huge case on simplification. It's simplification almost by design, where your tech stacks gets standardized, where you essentially then focus on, you remove the complexity out of the system, which removes set of errors, and essentially focuses on sort of value-added developments that the investment dollars can go towards.
Right. And Judith, what's that kind of big shiny apple that you can talk to clients about as they're trying to consider this decision to move to the cloud?
Yeah, you really can do this in the right way, end up with more resiliency, more capabilities by taking advantage of this in the right way. Having a strategy at the beginning. What is your endpoint? Where do you want to go? And determining the best way to go there. There is a lot of capability available in the cloud, and organizations, and we have two good examples here of organizations who have taken advantage of that and have high resiliency and availability. It can be done.
Great, that's good to know. Last question, we just have a few more minutes here. So I want to ask each of you if you can talk about top lessons learned as you've gone through this process, and what are the words of wisdom that you might share with your colleagues about how to do this and how to do it right. Let's start with Shadman.
Sure. I would say maybe a blasphemy to say this in a cloud panel, but I think one of the most important thing I would say is don't move to cloud just because everybody is doing it or because it's a cool thing to do. Assess it for your company, the needs you have, and the technology journey you are on, because it is, and it has to be a decision based on that. Because if you are not ready, you will not get the benefits, and you will get some of the pitfalls anyways. So do a very careful assessment around your own skill set, your planning, and how you're going to get the value out of it. That's probably one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is also take the safety and soundness very, very seriously. It is quite easy to sort of fall into a group think that everyone is doing it. It must be like everything must work fine, and I'm just going to move on and build on top of it. I think each company has to carefully plan to their own set of standards on safety and soundness, ensure that works that way, put additional layers where necessary, to put the right structure. I'm a believer in cookie cutters, but not when it comes down to core infrastructure. Cookie cutters, good. You can start this at the beginning, but you truly have to do your due diligence to have a disciplined migration. Both of those are easy to avoid. Easy to sort of overlook, but I think very important lessons.